I remember to pull it up in my phone too. Hi, everyone. Hello. Welcome. Welcome. As I get myself set up here. Up, look at this. My phone's blowing up with all the things like you're going live. And yes, thank you. I
Yes,
am.
I was aware. I did push the button.
I am. I really appreciate that. Let's see here. Wanted to make sure that there we go. Perfect. We are all set. So let me take a few moments to introduce our amazing guest. We were just chatting about frigid winter temperatures because our wonderful guest hails from Wisconsin.
A while ago. I haven't lived in Wisconsin since 2010, I think, but I spent a long time there. Yeah.
Recently, because she's warm to. So our wonderful guest, Cathlyn Melvin, has moved to warmer temperatures, and she is thankfully on with us today because she is. We've had Cathlyn on before to talk about TEDx because she is a TEDx. She's a TEDx expert, and without further ado, let me give a little bit of her. Let me read her amazing journey to you. So Cathlyn is a TEDx coach and copywriter whose insight has been featured via TEDx, Live Global, Fempreneur Online, the Writing Cooperative, and other outlets. With a degree in theater performance and over a decade as an actor, director, writer, editor, and educator, Cathlyn draws on her diverse experiences to help mission-driven experts design and deliver their world-changing messages through TEDx coaching and done-for-you copywriting services. When she's not writing or coaching, you might find Cathlyn baking something delicious made of chocolate. That's awesome. Or the other stuff's awesome too. Or reading in the sunshine with her very snuggly and loudly purring cat Tucker. Cathlyn, welcome.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be back and talking with your community again. You might see Tucker eventually. Right now, he's asleep in the bedroom, but he may show up.
I was going to ask that. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Danny Whitestone. I am a small business coach and trainer, and I help entrepreneurs grow and scale their businesses so that they can be less stressed and make more money. And that's one of the reasons I invited Cathlyn back because, of course, speaking at the TEDx level, my goodness, that kind of goes into my first question for you. Goodness gracious, in terms of what it can do for you and your business. And so because we know that coming out as an expert, it's great coming out as an expert in our field. How do we do that? One of the ways is through speaking, and the creme de la creme, is TEDx. There's TED too, but TEDx is something that is incredibly achievable for all of us. Though, if you were my client, I would say, any kind of talk is achievable. But in terms of doing something even like this year, TEDx is available to you through working with someone like Cathlyn and being on this seminar like it is right now, our talk right here. So we know credibility and visibility, but what does that look like in real life? Like, what have you seen? What happens like let's wave the magic wand and our TEDx talk is done. Like, what does that look like? What happens afterwards?
So, using myself as an example, when I gave my TEDx talk, my talk isn't about my business. It's not even really related to my business at all. It is about being a quitter. And when I gave my talk, I was primarily working as a copywriter and an editor. And I didn't really have any business goals around my TEDx talk. I just knew that it was something that I would really love to do. And I had this idea that I thought people needed to be thinking about. And even though my topic isn't about my business, even though my goals for TEDx weren't related to my business, even so, once I gave my TEDx talk, the visibility of my business increased. And what I found was that just by having that logo, having that sort of borrowed trust, because we all trust the TEDx brand, that when I pitched myself to podcasts or to group leaders to go into their masterminds or into their coaching containers to speak about my work, that those conversations went so much more smoothly and so much quicker. So I was able to, within about a year after my TEDx talk, I had been on almost 50 podcasts. I had done a bunch of interviews like this. I had gone into programs and given presentations on my expert topics. And so it's really that having that recognizable credibility marker helps lubricate all of those conversations and makes it all so much easier to get in front of other people's audiences.
And one thing that I failed to mention earlier as part of your amazing intro is that your business is Right Cat Creative. This is what you do for your clients.
Yeah. Yeah. I started out in this business, like I said, working as a copywriter and an editor, and I still do offer those services. I write a lot of email sequences. Emails are my favorite, and a lot of sales pages and websites primarily for coaches. And when I gave my TEDx talk, and then I was sort of galvanizing my business community to get them ready to spread it when it came out online, people started looking at my background because, like you read in my bio, I have this decade of professional experience as an actor and a director. I have that training for years beforehand. I was a competitive speaker way back in high school. That was my sport of choice, and I competed all the way up to the national level. And then combining all of that with my expertise as a writer and an editor, people sort of looked at that whole suite of skill sets and were like, okay, you have all of that. And now you've given a TEDx talk. I want a TEDx talk. Can you help me through that process? And so the TEDx service that I offer now really came about super organically, and it just felt so right. And I've been working with TEDx speakers it'll come up on a year later this spring. And it's so good. I love seeing people like push through the breakthroughs where people often get stuck in well, I don't know what I want to talk about, or I have so many ideas that I don't know what to focus on. Or the part of the process where they're first trying to get their ideas down onto paper. And then the memorization. Those are sort of the big three places where people can really get stuck. And so watching them go through that process and holding their hand and giving them guidance and pulling them through little by little is just super rewarding. And I've really loved working on it.
I got to see this too, because the last time you were here, we had a wonderful member of our group on the call with us for your TEDx presentation. And now we're here talking again, and she's already given hers.
She has, yeah. She gave her talk in October, I think. So Christina was really fantastic. We started working together last spring. She, within 3 weeks of working with me, had submitted her first application, and 3 weeks later was accepted. And there were some like fortunate happenstance timeline things that allowed for that. Usually it would take it's a longer process to get accepted to your event. But the way that she was such a go-getter and like did all of the things, checked all the boxes, really allowed her to accelerate that. And yeah, so she gave her talk already last October, and she's waiting for it to come out online now.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, we all know, so we can share it and spread it too, because I want to watch it, since I wasn't able to get there in person. So before someone makes contact with you, if they're thinking about a TEDx, like what are those things that hold people back? And let's talk about that so that they feel more confident making that next step. Why?
Yeah.
What do you find with people what's holding them back from, if they have an inkling to do it, what's holding them back to pursue it?
So there are, first of all, 3,500 plus TEDx events across the globe every single year.
Wow.
There are TEDx events happening every single day all around the world. Here in the States, they usually happen on the weekends. But I think that sometimes we see the talks that go viral,
Mhm.
and we look back and we say, oh, that's Brene Brown, or that's Simon Sinek, or these other people who now we associate as with like really big names, really big experts. But when they gave their TEDx talks, they weren't that big. When I gave my TEDx talk, I was less than a year into my business. And I think that people often think, oh, I'm not established enough, or my audience isn't big enough, or I just haven't been around long enough. All of these pieces of like, I am not enough for that yet.
Mhm.
And that couldn't be further from the truth, because TED and TEDx actually don't want circuit speakers. They don't look for people who are professional speakers. They look for people who have really valuable ideas that can change how audiences see the world. And so if you are a newer speaker, that's not something that's necessarily going to hold you back at all. That can really actually be a boon to you as you are going through that process. But that's something that I think people get tripped up on when they think about these other people that they know have given TEDx talks.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I didn't realize that, but it makes complete sense. So
Mhm.
what would be if someone is, let me back it up for people. Like if people already have an inkling, like they want to do a TEDx, and please let me know in the comments. Do you, is a TEDx something that you are aspiring to do? But if someone is like, oh, like I would love to do a TEDx, but they need to step, but maybe they haven't done like any public speaking at all.
Mhm.
They're really scared of it. What would be a first step for the next step for anyone who's interested in TEDx, who's like kind of there, that kind of there in terms of like, all right, how do I get going
Mhm.
on this? Contact Cathlyn.
So
But if they're like not quite there yet, what would be a next step that they can take to move them further down this path?
if you think that TEDx might be something that you're interested in doing, but you haven't had that experience presenting an idea before, start with your social media. I think that that is the most accessible avenue that we have to put our voices and our faces out there online. And you can start by doing a 2-minute Facebook Live or Instagram Live, or go live on LinkedIn, and start with something that feels really achievable, even if it's scary, because we most of us start out being a little afraid of turning on the camera and just talking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But having those little baby steps of going live on social media, and then coming up with maybe a longer presentation, a workshop or something that you give over Zoom or something like that. Those are ways that you can get used to hearing your voice. You can get used to the idea that people are seeing
Mhm.
and perceiving you, and sort of earn your confidence and help that grow, so that you can then move on to speaking in person. But I would say don't get hung up on those steps. Don't think, well, I have to go live, 30 times before I can start the TEDx process. You don't. Give yourself a handful of experiences, half a dozen times of talking to an audience, even if you can't see or interact with the audience. And then if TEDx is really something that you want to do, get started on that journey, because most people, it's going to take at least 6 months between when they get started, they really start thinking about their idea, and when they get on the stage. So you've got all that time in there too, to keep honing those skills and keep leveling up your comfort.
Based on that, how do you know when you're ready? How do you know that's the $1 million question for anything we do in life, somewhat. But how do you know you're ready to actually? I know you have a great story behind this, so I hope I hear it. How do you know you're ready to step on that stage and deliver that TEDx?
I would say that if you have a general sort of kind of idea of maybe what you would want to talk about, you're ready.
Okay.
That's all you need. Especially if you're going to come on and work with a coach like me, that's where you have to be. When I start working with my clients, that's the level that they're at, and we start by taking that maybe sort of kind of big idea and refining it and distilling it down into a really concise, clear, compelling idea worth spreading, which is then the foundation for your application. It's the foundation for your TEDx talk. Yeah, that's all you need. Don't
That's
get
great.
ahead of yourself.
I just thought about asking another question about
Yeah.
anybody that's watching this either live or the replay is like, what would your TEDx be? What are some of your ideas?
Mhm.
I would love to hear them. It's
And along the lines of that question,
yeah,
something else that people sometimes get stuck on
please.
is thinking, "Ah, my idea is not world changing enough. My idea is not big enough, not powerful enough." Because we watch these talks that are like, I visited this remote town where no one had drinking water and everyone was dying of dehydration, and I figured out how to make the village survive. It doesn't have to be something like that. You can say, look, in my industry, we're having this conversation about XYZ, but what no one is talking about is W. And in order to see the whole conversation, we really need to bring W into that conversation. It can be a little twist, it can be a little perspective shift, because when you stand in front of an audience and you share an idea, whatever your idea is, it is going to ripple out. It is going to start there in that room, and then they're going to go to lunch the next day and say, hey, I saw this really great TEDx talk yesterday, and it was all about WXYZ. And it's going to move out from there. So don't feel like you have to, you know, uh, uh, just tell the world that the world revolves around the sun and not the other way around. It can start with just a little drop of an idea that ripples out.
Because you're right, and I know a lot of us are listening too in terms of listening to TED Talks and TEDx Talks with sometimes the most simple things and stories of someone's life journey and experience end up being like the most profound.
Mm-hmm.
Whether sometimes it's in and you're right, those ideas, I guess, kind of like, was it ideas? Is it ideas worth sharing?
Ideas worth spreading is what
Ideas,
TED calls it. Yeah.
yeah. Oh my goodness
Yeah.
gracious. So anybody who definitely, if you're thinking about a TEDx talk, right, let us know what some of your ideas are in the comments, because I'd love to hear some of that. What are some other, when someone approaches you in terms of the TEDx process, I'm trying to think, if they are feeling like, whether, I know we talked about this a little bit, but if they are feeling a little bit hesitant, what are some of the things that you tell them to encourage them to take that step, or to take that baby step down the path?
So I think it depends what their hesitation is,
Okay.
first of all, and we talked through a couple of those. One that we didn't talk about quite yet is the idea of memorizing a talk,
Oh,
because
yes, this is the story I wanted to
yes,
bring. So thank you for bringing it back to this.
TED is scripted. TED is memorized, which most of us, we haven't had to memorize something, let alone a 10 or 12 or 15-minute talk, since we were in high school. It's been 20 or 30 years, since we've had to do something like that. So our brain is sort of out of shape in that way.
Gettysburg Address jumps to mind. Did anyone ever have
Yeah.
the Gettysburg Address
Yeah.
for some reason?
Yeah, that was definitely one of them. Lots of poems. Yeah, and like for me, I obviously had a career as an actor, and so I kept on working that muscle into my adulthood. But
Remember,
it's
petrified. I've done it. I can do it. But that was in terms of the one we didn't talk about.
Mhm,
Probably reason it petrifies me. I would have like
mhm.
nightmares that I would like, oh, I forgot. So yes, let's talk a little bit
Yeah.
about, in terms of when you're ready, and let's talk about memorization. That would be great.
So What I like to share with people, first of all, as we get into that sort of section of their process, is that one of the reasons that memorization tends to be so scary is because we try to do too much at once. So we'll sit down and we'll try to memorize a whole page, and we might feel like we did it, and then tomorrow it'll all be gone, and we'll be like, I wasted all that time. And so what I encourage my clients to do is start really small. 3 times a day, memorize for 15 minutes, just 15 minutes, and then stop. Your brain can't hold that much information. And so doing it in those little bite-sized chunks and adding on and adding on and adding on and little by little increasing that amount of time helps you with the repetition and that the sort of that natural memory that comes out. And there are a whole bunch of other ways that I help people through that process. There's a whole, outside of even the coaching sessions, there's a whole document of different ways that the different learning types can memorize. So whether you're a kinesthetic learner or a visual learner, an auditory learner, a verbal learner, different ways that work really well for those learning types that I provide and that I train them on. But I think that is such a mental hurdle for people that it's sometimes scary to say, you know what, I'm going to do this. And when I get to that point, I trust myself and I trust my coach that we'll be able to get through that together. But you absolutely can. I'm not sure if this is the story that you were thinking of, but when I gave my TEDx talk, the night before we had a dress rehearsal, and I was standing in the auditorium with one of the other speakers who was slated to go before me, and she was sort of like fingering some note cards, and she whispered, she was like, I've never done this without my notes before. The night of dress rehearsal. The next day was the event. And I internally panicked for her because at that point I had done my talk over 30 times, up on its feet, fully memorized, in front of people, got notes, and she had worked with she had gone through a program of a well-known TEDx coach. And I just remember thinking, that person has failed you. Absolutely. Like, you did not get what you were supposed to get out of that program. And of course, I didn't say any of these things on the outside. I was like, it's all in there.
Wow,
you've rehearsed. You should just quit right now. But it is really important to me to get my speakers the repetitions where they can feel confident, where they can feel really powerful going into their event. And we're all going to be nervous. We're all going to be scared stepping out on the stage, about to give a memorized talk in front of a sea of faces. But if you've never been in the position where you're supposed to be performing and you aren't really prepared, it's really scary. Like, there's a reason that the actor's nightmare is a real thing.
It's so much worse. I can speak from experience here, as some of you may or may not know this, but I have a minor in trumpet performance. That was one of my first loves and passions, and in terms of trumpet. And those auditions and those performances that I went in just like really well prepared, well rehearsed, and then it's not a problem. You go in there, maybe a little bit of nerves, but it's different. There's like a confidence behind it. Like, I got this, but I'm here, like whatever. It almost feels exciting but boring at the same time, which is lovely. But the other times, I quickly learned not to do this, but other times, or if it happens that you're just not prepared, it dysregulates your entire body.
Oh my goodness.
Over everything. And it almost makes it, I bombed one audition, and like my entire mouth dried out. I couldn't do anything, no sound out. It was terrible. So I can speak from experience that yes, just going in and you would proof people. You would make sure that, and it's just a matter of time and practice. It's not a matter of, do it or not do it. It's just like that you can do it. It's just, but make sure you're on a schedule, like with someone with a guidance, like somebody like you, to get that practice in and proofing it. It's like, okay, now go to the senior center and see who wants to learn about, I don't know, your mushroom garden,
whatever it is that you're about to talk about. Because that repetition is so important. I remember my senior year of high school, I had qualified for the national forensics tournament in my category, oratory, and I should have done really well. Like, I had the potential that year to like potentially go up to the finals. I dropped in the first round because the regular season had ended in April, and then nationals weren't until June. And I didn't do the work in between that I should have been doing. And so I got flustered. Not that I forgot anything, but because I didn't have the repetitions under my belt going into nationals, I got into the room and I was worried about my time. I was worried about going over time.
Yep.
And so I didn't realize it, but I was speeding through. And my 10-minute talk ended up being like 8.5 minutes in each of my first 3 rounds. And then after the first 3 rounds, when they make their first cut, and I was cut. And I take that lesson that like devastation has never left me, of knowing this is my fault. This was totally preventable. I didn't do the work. And now I carry that with me through all of my projects, because it's so important.
And I want to say to something, like, if you, no matter what you're doing with speaking, just like being a musician or being a stand-up comedian, things are going to fall apart. Things are going to, despite the, in spite of preparation, with preparation. So I always like to weave into these conversations that it's not, technically could look like as failure, but it's not, because it's a lesson learned. And my mentor said, focus on the lesson and not the loss. And because you experienced that, and because like I experienced the torturous things, like, it becomes part of your being. And bring it, and we can bring that to our clients to make sure, like, oh yeah, hey, by the way, we're going to do this so you don't have to experience what I did. And that's one of the reasons, why we are coaches and clients. So so if you, and
I'm glad that you brought up this idea that like we all mess up, because we watch these TEDx talks on the internet and they seem so solid. Like, they don't flinch. In the room, people forget. People drop lines. People start sentences over. It is edited together to be clean and clear. So like, I didn't realize that until I gave my talk. And fortunately, like, I was prepared and confident enough that that did not happen to me. But several other speakers in my cohort, it did. One of them, they actually had her re-record her whole talk, like, at intermission.
Wow.
And I've been to several other events since then, and I have not gone to an event that hasn't had at least one speaker mess up in one way or another, and just like pause, start the paragraph over, start the sentence over, keep on going. So I think that's something that we can sort of pull back the curtain on a little bit and say, it happens, and it's totally okay if it happens, because the people in the room understand that happens, and the people on the internet are never going to know.
That is fascinating. I had absolutely no idea. So in terms of, just like anything with business, is just start with something, start with whatever the stage you're at, start with that next step and do your best. And it's that's different for all of us, because we have so many different strengths and things that aren't our strengths, which is fine. because that's what makes, and that's quite honestly, in talking about what the TEDx is looking for is that authenticity, and it's something we're sharing. And everyone that's listening to this most definitely has. I have not met a human being on the planet that doesn't have this amazing story and something that I learned from. So anybody that's listening to this recording here or live, hello for those live, please, if this is something that's, if this is something in your heart to do, take that first step. You can go ahead and find my cute little banners. Go ahead and reach out to Cathlyn. And Cathlyn, you do a free consult. I should have asked you this before we went on the slide, but you do a quick little phone call, talk to people, see where they're at, right?
Yeah. So I have a couple different ways that I connect with people. One of them is that every 2 months I do a live Q&A. So my next one is coming up next Tuesday, so a week from yesterday. And you can sign up for that at rightcatcreative.com, which she has on the screen, /TEDxQA. I was like, wait a minute, what is that? But it's /TEDxQA. And like I said, that'll happen next Tuesday. I always come in with a whole slew of common questions that I get about the process, about how to choose your topic, about how to find events, how to apply, how to prepare. And then there's also time I stay on the call until everyone's questions are answered. So you can come in with questions of your own, or you can just come in to listen, because I know personally I have a hard time knowing what questions to ask sometimes. So I always give space for that. So that's one thing that's coming up. The other way to get some information from me that's not in real time is I have a mini audio series that just came out this month that is also called TEDx Demystified, and you can get that at rightcatcreative.com /TEDx podcast.
Okay. This is the right banner. I wish I had the other banner up for the other one.
I should have given you the other link. That would have made sense since that's coming up so close.
I have it. I'll drop the ball. Host drops the ball on the TEDx.
Okay.
Right Cat Creative. Instead of that TEDx podcast, it's just /TEDxQA for that Q&A with Cathlyn. And of course, she's at Right Cat Creative. So, and I guess in terms of, I usually ask for a little bit of homework, but I think that was the homework in terms of how people can make that next step is get in touch with you, show up to, a Q&A and, or hop on that podcast and learn all about the awesome path of TEDx, which again, I also hope to be on at some point in time, and you can help polish me up because here.
Absolutely. I would be delighted.
Awesome. And thank you guys so much. Thank you, Cathlyn, so much for joining us. And again, I'm Danny Whitestone. You can find me at dannywhitestone.com, and under resources, you can actually find a link to the Facebook group that I run, the Women's Small Business and Leadership Network. And this is where I find and connect with amazing women like Cathlyn, who are so generous to come on and share their expertise with us so that we can all take these tools to grow our businesses so we can be less stressed, make more money. And along those lines, I've stepped out into the world of YouTube. So if you're catching this here, go ahead and like and subscribe. And I shouldn't laugh through that, but it's just fun. Oh, Cathlyn, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Do you have any other parting words for our audience here?
I think just a reminder that if you want a TEDx talk, you can get a TEDx talk. It's about knowing what your goals are. It's about having the right support and being persistent about it. But if that's something you want, you can get it.
And once you do, even, hopefully you'll connect with either of us for, to help move you along that path, especially Cathlyn. Don't call me for TEDx, definitely. Business stuff all day long. Cathlyn, definitely the TEDx and copywriting. But if you do, no matter what, let us know. Let us know you did it, because we will celebrate you up, down, and sideways.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. You have a great day. Bye.